How's it going, guys? This is Kevin here, and today we're going to talk about the paradox of what it's like being a highly sensitive person who is also an extrovert or has extroverted tendencies, and also that's essentially what we're going to talk about. We're also going to talk about what it's like being an ENFP because I believe that ENFPs are also, or at least very many of them, are likely highly sensitive people. And so this video is going to be great if you are a highly sensitive person who has those extroverted tendencies and you believe you're an extrovert. And it's also going to be a great video for ENFPs because I'm going to talk a lot about how, ENFPs, we tend to be the introverted extroverts. We like being out there in the external world, collecting our new experiences, having great, social interactions and connecting with a bunch of people. But we also have, by and large, and I don't know this for sure, I don't have exact statistics as to how many ENFPs are in fact highly sensitive people, but from my experience, being an ENFP, you are more susceptible to going through mood swings, you're more susceptible to sensitivities related to your environment, and you just have that sensitive nervous system. So if you guys are new to the channel, on this channel we talk about highly sensitive people, particularly from a male perspective, like how we can help, highly sensitive men and in the future of masculinity. We talk about personality psychology, so union typology, MBTI stuff, and some mental health stuff as well. So if any of those topics interest you, definitely hit the subscribe button and click the bell to stay notified when I release new videos. So getting into this, this is an interesting topic because I felt like there's a bit of a paradox here that exists, and I've always felt a bit confused when it comes to my social life. Because being a highly sensitive person, you're kind of, you do need to make sure you're taking care of your body, making sure you're giving yourself time to recharge and actually taking proper care of yourself, or self-care as people refer to it these days. But also being an ENFP, you want to be, out there as much as possible in the external world, connecting with people and, really collecting new experiences. Experiencing new adventures, you can get bored very easily. So this obviously presents a bit of a conflict, right? Because you have these two competing forces against each other. And so what this actually is there's a term out there, and so there's the HSP trait, right? Which is a temperamental trait. Well, there happens to be another temperamental trait, and this is called high sensation seeking, or HSS. And there's a great book that talks a lot about that. It's called Thrill by Dr. Tracy Cooper, who's a good authority in the HSP space. So I'll link the book down below if you guys want to pick it up. But the book talks about the HSS, high sensation seeker trait. And about 30% of highly sensitive people will also have this high sensation seeker trait. And I'll probably make another video maybe dedicated to specifically this trait, but this obviously presents a bit of a conflict because as an HSP, you're more prone to want to reflect before acting, you want to be more cautious, you want to, you're just more sensitive to the different, the five senses in your environment, touch, smell, taste, all those things. But as an HSS, or a high sensation seeker, you have a tendency to want to seek out thrills and new adventures. You want to seek out new experiences. You're more prone to disinhibition. So you're a bit more spontaneous and wanting to, more willing to kind of go with the flow and just experience things, even if, you're not necessarily sure what the outcome will be. And you're also you have a higher tendency to be bored more easily. So these four things are what generally makes up this HSS trait, and you don't need to possess all of them to be an HSS. When I got tested, when I first went to see a therapist regarding being an HSP and getting some support with that, we did the HSS test as well, and it turns out I was kind of on the fringe. I wasn't a full-fledged HSS, and I wasn't a huge fan of the test because a lot of the questions tend to ask about, would you seek out drugs, and how often do you go get really drunk and seek out new drug experiences, and it was very focused on substances, and that wasn't necessarily my form of seeking out new experiences. but I do believe I'm an HSS, and it's very relevant to ENFPs because I actually believe that a lot of these HSS people who are also HSPs are ENFPs. Because of that tendency for ENFPs to also be highly sensitive people. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about. In terms of the HSP dimensions, HSPs, they're deep thinkers. They process things really deeply, and that can kind of be a conflict because, of course, we know that a lot of the world is full of sensor types who maybe wouldn't process things as deeply as maybe an intuitive person would. And so, when you're going out socializing, a lot of the people you interact with are sensors. And so that can present a bit of a challenge in terms of finding those people who you can maybe have go a bit deeper with, go a bit below those surface level topics. I was thinking about this the other day, but I know a lot of people, actually most people, things they commonly talk about are like, oh, what movies have you seen? Or like, what shows are you watching on Netflix right now? And I literally am clueless in those conversations. Nothing against, by the way, nothing against people who watch Netflix or whatever. That's totally cool. But I personally just don't watch Netflix, and I just don't. I still watch movies, but just not that often. And so I can't really relate a lot to those types of topics of conversation that actually come up a lot in social situations, in your average world, in the regular world, like whether you're at your workplace or whether you're just even with close friends. I have sensor friends and they're great, but a lot of the topics, conversation with them tend to be more on that surface level. So that can present a conflict with being an HSP who also wants to extrovert themselves, and seek out more social interactions rather than a more introverted HSP who may be able to get that pleasure of deep thinking from maybe just watching YouTube videos or just mainly seeking that out more so in solitude, whether that's from books or what have you. These are all just my personal assumptions, by the way. If you're an introverted HSP and you don't do these things, comment down below and let me know what your experience has been like. But this is just based off my own interpretations and my experiences. So the second HSP dimension is tendency to be easily overstimulated. This is another conflict when you're out socializing as an HSP, because who's also an extrovert, because a lot of social activities, at least when you go out to like venues or typically when you're an adult, if you're going to socialize with friends, you guys go out somewhere. Maybe you go to a bar or you have a drink, or you go out to a arcade, or I don't know, like there's a lot of cool venues out there now where you go with friends, right? Now the challenge is that a lot of these venues tend to be quite loud. So it's not necessarily the most ideal environment for someone who's a bit more sensitive to loud noise. Sometimes smell, but I found for myself, it's mostly the loud noises that can sometimes be difficult, especially after a long day, and especially if I don't drink, because usually when you drink, it kind of blocks out some of that sensitivity related to loud noise. And then, I guess taste, touch, it's mainly the loud noise. That's what I find is like the biggest thing. And especially if you go out in a group, I find that other extroverts, they really like going out in kind of larger groups. Like the more people the better, right? And the challenge with that is, as an HSP, it can be very hard to keep up with all the things being shouted and the conversations that are all happening in this large group, because there's so many people trying to talk and you almost have to compete to kind of get your word in and everything. So that can present a bit of a challenge. And I find, and I'll get into this, but I can be picky with my social situations that I choose to put myself in. And I tend to prefer social interactions where there's one person, two, sometimes three, but I can get a thrill out of interactions where there's a lot more people. It's just that it's a bit more difficult for me as a highly sensitive person to keep up with all the stimuli. And also I have a tendency to maybe drink a bit more if I put myself in those types of environments, because it of course blocks out that sensitivity to loud noise. And then the last, that we touched on two HSP dimensions. The other is, emotional reactivity, easily, being reactive with your emotions, and also empathy as well. This isn't so much of an issue, I find. If you're going out with other people, you're wanting to extrovert yourself, involve yourself a lot in social interactions. It can be an issue, I guess, depending on if the people you're with are talking about very emotionally, like maybe you're an empath, like maybe you're someone who's maybe an INFJ who's very sensitive to how other people feel, and so you're more likely to feed off of everyone who you're with, all their energies, right, as opposed to just your own energy. And so that can be a bit challenging, I think, when you're really trying to just you just have a good time and stuff. Like maybe you're able to pick up on some of the energies of the other people you're with, and maybe they're not as good, or maybe the people you're talking with are just complaining about something or ranting about something really negative. And so that's where it can be a bit of a negative aspect to extroverting yourself and socializing with a lot of different people. That's really the only, and then I guess if you're an FI user, or you're more tendency to experience mood swings, sometimes if you go out with people, you can have that odd occasion where maybe something they say is a little more, hits you internally a little bit more, and you kind of, or maybe you take what they say personally more often, or you're a bit more sensitive to criticism. That's where, like, if I'm hanging out with, let's say, a bunch of ESTPs, or personality types who are a bit more straightforward, direct, that can be a challenge for me, because if they say something and I take it personally, now that I'm in this social setting, I don't want to just make it seem like I'm affected by that, and I kind of go inside my head and I start like reflecting on it really deeply, and kind of just wallowing inside on in the like what the hell did they just say, like did they really just say that, that has happened, and it can happen. So beyond that, the final HSP dimension is, sensitivity to stimuli. So again, we mentioned the loud noises. This is just basically different physical stimuli in the environment, whether that's light or noise or taste or smell. It's just going to be a bit heightened because your nervous system is a bit more sensitive. So I pretty much hit on all this stuff, but lights is another thing. I guess if you went out to a club, maybe that would be have an effect on you, but I've personally found, usually if I go to a club or something, I'm having a bit to drink, and it's just not that big of a factor. So you have all those HSP dimensions, where if you're an HSP, these are things you want to keep in mind, and they're also important needs that you have that, you want to make sure you're fulfilling, obviously. But as I mentioned, we went over the HSS dimensions, which are like seeking thrills, wanting to seek new experiences, seeking out disinhibition, and also easily being bored. And I guess just to elaborate on those a little bit more, wanting to seek out thrills and stuff, that can be a challenge if you're a highly sensitive person as well, right? Because you're gonna need to do things that are maybe a bit more spontaneous, more maybe you've never done it before, maybe it's a bit scary. And this isn't so much me. I'm not really a physical thrill seeker, and I actually believe that ENFPs may not fall into this category as much. Physical thrill seeking is more of an SE thing. I believe that maybe ESFPs would be have a more tendency to experience or want to experience. But there is that thrill-seeking aspect that HSPs who want to pause and reflect before acting, this comes into conflict with just going for it and just acting. You know what I mean? And then the second one is seeking out new experiences. This is a big one for me. My any hero, my any dominant function wants to seek out new experiences all the time. I want to always be, learning about new things, discovering new things, experiencing new things, even if they're kind of outside my comfort zone sometimes. And that can be a bit of a challenge because, yeah, of course, I'm a little bit hesitant. I have that HSP hesitancy. where I'm very like, is this a good idea? Maybe I should plan out this a little bit more. Maybe I shouldn't just jump into this. You know, what are all the potential negative consequences? And if you have friends who are a bit more spur of the moment and are just like, oh, let's just go do this, let's go do that, let's go here, you know, let's experience whitewater rafting or something. It's like, whoa, dude, I've never done that before. Like, let's chill out. Let's hold up a sec. I got to research whitewater rafting. I got to see, you know, like, is this something I want to engage in? What are the risks? Blah, blah, blah. These are things that you think about as an HSP who is also a high sensation seeker. And then there's also, of course, disinhibition, which is, again, just tendency to be more spontaneous. Being a perceptive type, like a P type in terms of MBTI, like an ENFP, we can be spontaneous, at least more than certain other personality types. But I find like, you know, if our SI inferior is a little more fearful and is a bit uncomfortable, which goes in line with being an HSP to some extent, you know, I think that can present a conflict, as I mentioned before, where we're not as, we don't have that tendency to just want to jump in. And then, of course, the last thing is easily getting bored. And this is where I'll jump into the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is my SI inferior, and how, you know, SI inferior, we really need to give ourselves proper self-care. We need to recognize when we're burning out. We can't just keep going, and collecting new experiences, you know, doing. We need to kind of settle down, take care of our bodies that are, you know, take care of our sensitive nervous systems, and give our body the chance to really revitalize itself so we can hit the ground running again. But when you're easily bored, you know, it can be tough to kind of be disciplined enough to really give yourself the attention you need to really be healthy mentally and physically, and give your body what it needs to, you know, restore itself energy-wise. So I have a tendency to neglect my SI inferior a lot and just want to just seek out, just do something all the time because I'm bored. So that pretty much covers it. You can see how those two, being an HSP and also being a high sensation seeker, there's a lot of conflicting elements. And as an extrovert, you have to deal with those things a lot. So as I mentioned, SI inferior. So when I was typed and I went through the typing service and they said that I was an ENFP, what they said is my SI inferior, so I've had some history with feeling socially anxious, and they essentially said that that's coming from my SI inferior because I have a lot of discomfort around putting myself into social situations that are suitable for me and where I can kind of be myself and feel comfortable. And SI inferior is very big on, or SI in general is just big on finding comfort. And if it's in that inferior slot in the MBTI cognitive functions, it can be tough to surpass that and really get over that discomfort and really put myself into social situations that are good for me. So there's a combination of that, right? But then there's also FI, right? I have FI parent. I'm very responsible with my FI. And if I feel something, and so I'm also pessimistic as well with my FI. And so if I feel something and I feel like I want to do something or don't want to do something, I'm like, man, I just don't feel like doing that. You know, if my friend suggests something and it's maybe something I should do and it'd be for my own benefit, if I'm like, oh, I don't know, I'm just not very comfortable doing that. I've never done it before. Like, man, I don't know. I don't have great energy enough to do that. Like, I'm kind of, you know, having an off day energy-wise. I just don't feel like doing that. And you can see how that kind of jeopardizes my ability to be out there and actually collect my new experiences and be extrovert myself, right? And be around extroverts and have good social interactions. So that can be a conflict. And so I'm very picky in social situations, and that's kind of the main focal point of this video. I definitely, if you're a highly sensitive extrovert or an ENFP, comment down below and let me know, like, what's your experience with social situations? Like, are you picky? You know, do you go based off like how you feel all the time? Like how do you navigate social situations where you're highly sensitive, but you're also very extroverted and you want to be out there interacting socially? So let me know. And so I tend to be I tend to have this criteria every time I want to go do something social. I'm like, okay, I want there to be maybe 1 or 2 people. I want to make sure it's people I'm very close with so I feel comfortable. I want to make sure I'm going in only these types of places because that's where what I like, and what will make me feel comfortable, and what I personally like really want to do, not necessarily what they want to do. And then the people also have to be deep thinkers, and they also have to be intuitive, and I need to be having deep conversations all the time. And of course, when you have all these criteria, it's not always realistic, right? It's not always realistic to expect that every social outing you have is going to meet all these criteria for what you want. So that can be really tough, because you kind of have to self-sacrifice a little bit on some of that. Maybe you have to hang out with your sensor friends who are not as intuitive. Maybe you have to hang out in a group of 4 instead of 2 because that's just what the social situation that's available. And maybe there's an event going on where your friend is throwing some kind of event and there happens to be a lot of people, and you don't necessarily want to miss out on that because you may have fun, right? But even though you want to hang out with 2 people, you got to kind of self-sacrifice on that, right? So that presents a challenge. And then of course we talked about how SI, self-care is so important for an ENFP. They need to have that discipline, that self-discipline to take care of themselves, to make sure that when they do go out and socialize, that they're at their best and they can really show up with a good, strong energy level. Even though they're an HSP, they can show up fully recharged so they can be at their best mentally and physically. They can be fun to hang out with because they're not like, super moody. Just making sure they take care of themselves in terms of getting proper sleep, eating properly, taking time to rest, get proper sleep. Yeah, I just mentioned that. Working out consistently, make sure they're just in a proper state physically. And so that's something that's also a challenge, because when you get bored all the time, you may not want to do those things. Oh, I don't want to, go work out. I want to do this more interesting thing, or I don't want to miss out on this social interaction or event because I kind of want to see all these people and stuff, and I'm an extrovert. I want to go out all the time to these social events, but I know that my body right now needs sleep, or my body right now needs to go do a workout, or my body right now needs to meditate. I've had a long, stressful week. I need to take time to take care of myself properly, mentally and emotionally. Those are not always things that we prioritize as an ENFP, or I'm sure if you're a highly sensitive person who's also an extrovert. So the final thing I wanted to discuss is, how do I handle this? How do I cope with all this? I don't have all the answers, but I do have kind of some things that have come into my mind that I think can be helpful. One of those is that, definitely have sensor friends. Like, sensor friends are great, and of course, if you're not familiar with MBTI, sensor friends are just people who have the S in the 4 letters. These are people who are not as, they're more prone to think about the here and now and kind of the past than they are prone to think about the future and, more deep thinking topics or more abstract topics. They're more concrete. So those friends, there's a lot, you're going to have some probably, because there's 70% of people, I believe, is it 70%? I think 70% of people are sensors, 30% intuitives. So you're going to have a lot of sensor friends, and these are great people to go out and still, seek out new experiences with. Maybe you're friends with an ESFP. Well, they actually really enjoy getting sensory experiences out there. They enjoy partying. They're a good time. So go out there and hang out with them. Like, go to parties, do this stuff, even though you may be a bit hesitant. ESTPs, they may want to do, they may be kind of a little more harsh, maybe a bit more truthful all the time, and they may want to get you outside your comfort zone really badly. And so go along with that. They can teach you a lot, right? They're very good at living in the moment and being more hands-on as well. Maybe they want to go play some sports, and you're a bit maybe you're not as good at sports, but go out there and get that experience, because with SI being in the inferior slot as an ENFP, you need to be collecting as many experiences as possible in order to be able to have your FI apply judgments to that, right? So do it, right? Go out there, experience things. I'm trying to give another example. Let's say you're friends with an ENTP. They also have any hero, or any is the dominant function, extroverted intuition, which means both of you guys love exploring new ideas, and both of you guys like collecting new experiences. So go out there and engage with them, explore new things, have new experiences, learn from them. So these are just, well, that's an intuitive example, actually. I was meaning to give a lot of sensor examples, but my point with sensors is there's so much you can learn from sensors, even if they're opposite from you, or, they may not be as, capable of deep thinking. I mean, that's cool. There's still a lot you can get from them in social situations, and a lot you can offer them. And you can probably find those a lot easier. So my point there is sacrifice a bit of those HSP tendencies, like wanting to deep think all the time, and, being more prone to wanting to reflect, and realize that hanging out with your sensor friends will be good for you a lot of the time, and you'll actually come out of the social interaction being like, man, I had fun, I learned a lot, and these are great people. And intuitive friends, I don't want to discount that entirely. We still need, we have a need for, deep thinking, reflection, and we have a need to connect with people on that more deep intellectual level. And so where can you meet these intuitive people, right? I don't have all the answers, but what I have found is that, there is that app called Meetup, right? And I was thinking about this the other day, and I'm like, you know what? And I've been to a couple Meetup groups. I've been to a Toastmasters group that's on Meetup, and I've been to some other Meetups. And I find that the people I meet there are more, they're more willing, or more capable of having kind of more out of the box conversations, and maybe talking about philosophical things, or things, emotional things, or just things that are a bit more not on the surface level. And so I do run into a lot of intuitives in those groups, and I think that those groups can be great to find intuitives. So definitely, if you live in a city, obviously, seek out meetup.com and download the Meetup app, and check out, what kind of groups exist in your area, because there's groups for everything. And there are a lot of intuitive people in a lot of those groups, especially because the groups can revolve around like personal growth. They can revolve around, public speaking, different kinds of things, philosophy and stuff like that. So that's kind of the thing. But, if you want to take these intuitive friends and maybe build a more deeper connection with them, it just takes time. That's one area where I still feel like I want to continue pursuing and developing a little bit better, which is, in these Meetup groups that I've gone to, finding people that I can develop more of a one-to-one connection with. But another thing to keep in mind is a lot of these Meetup groups have like Facebook groups attached to them, or they have ways you can meet people online. And that's another way where you can actually find intuitive people and maybe connect with them one-to-one, maybe using private message or whatever. And that's kind of what I've done as well, because I've been able to meet some people online who actually live in my area, and actually talk to them one-on-one via private message and connect in that way. So that's pretty much how I've been navigating being an HSP extrovert and being an ENFP. So that pretty much wraps things up. As I mentioned, I will leave a link to the book Thrill in the description below if you're an HSP who's also wants to learn about high sensation seeking or being an HSS. Maybe you think you're a high sensation seeker based off the criteria I described. So if you want to learn more about that trait, I'll link that book down below. And as well, again, leave in the comments below what your experience has been as an HSP extrovert or an ENFP. How do you navigate social situations? Have you figured this out? Do you have any strategies you want to share? Let me know down below. And that's pretty much it for this video. So if you found it helpful, definitely leave a like. And again, if you're interested in more videos like this, talking about MBTI, talking about highly sensitive people and all other topics, definitely hit the subscribe button and click the bell to stay notified of future videos. So that's essentially it, guys. I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Take care.